Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture podcast. I am your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create ecosystems and environments where people thrive. Look, today we have an amazing guest, Christine Robertson, and she brings over 2 decades of experience in the nonprofit world and has dedicated her career to helping make mission-driven organizations amplify not only their impact but amplify their impact through data, strategy, and technology. Look, she began her journey in 2005 as a nonprofit database manager and has since worked both inside organizations as a consultant. And she's seen firsthand how the right systems don't just make work easier, they make missions stronger. Christine, how you doing?
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Thank you so very much. So before we get started, what has you excited in this season?
You know, it's been so interesting to watch how technology has shifted and changed over the last 20 years and how we've made so many things easier, and we've opened so many new avenues and ways to embrace technology. And I know everyone is talking about AI, and there's a bit of that gets exciting for me, but it's also exciting to just see people taking all of those different avenues in technology and merging them into fundraising and helping us to build better relationships and to just do that work and to see that good take over in different ways and fuel missions that change the world for the better. So I think ultimately it's how technology makes a difference in people's lives through social good and all of those kinds of things.
No, I love that, and I find that a lot of leaders, especially within the social impact industry and just in the nonprofit space specifically, shy away from all of these technological tools. They believe that it's interfering and hurting the ability to build relationships with donors or relationships with their stakeholders. But you may see it a different perspective. It may, and if done well, it could really amplify the ability to be able to build relationships and all of these things. Can you talk to us about how the industry is in fact changing? And what can we do to leverage data as a tool to be able to change with it so that we continue to maintain the power of relationships within our organizations?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that stands out to me is when I first started, the donor database was really the thing that one person owned, and they put all the data in and they pulled it back out. And other team members may or may not actually put their call notes or their meeting notes in the system or update all that kind of information, because there was a lot of fear, I think, around touching the system, so to speak. But ultimately, I think that culture of fear led to a lot of issues in relationships, because as staff members change roles or leave organizations, if that information was in their heads or their inbox or a spreadsheet on their desktop and not in the CRM, it meant that the next team member didn't have the full picture of the relationship in order to connect with those donors.
Mm.
So I say all that to say, I think that as technology is growing and as we're embracing it in so many parts of our lives, I do think culturally we're getting better about seeing our CRM as not just this isolated piece of tech that we need to send thank you letters, but more of a way to actually house that relationship so that we as a human can connect to people with all the information at our fingertips.
No, I love that. Now, for the leader that is just being introduced to all of this and is like, wow, this is amazing information that she's sharing. Like, how do I do this? What are some practical steps that you would recommend organizations implementing or doing so that they can be able to implement and integrate a lot of these data tools or technological tools while still maintaining these relationships with individuals?
I think the first step is really making sure you do have one consolidated source of truth, that everything goes in there, and making it a priority. So I've seen so often where an organization has a CRM, but they don't like the email tool, so they have MailChimp or Constant Contact. Not to play favorites here, but whatever email tool they pull in, and then they pull in an event tool, and then maybe they pull in some other tool here and there to manage all these pieces. But all that information, because it's in separate places, means that you don't have one full picture of your
Good.
supporter. So if I told you on the online sign up that I want you to refer to me by this name instead of I don't like nicknames for my name, but it's a perfect name to use as an example. I'm not a
Yeah.
Chrissy, but say I tell you to call me Chrissy in
Yeah.
MailChimp, but that doesn't make it in your CRM. So you send me letters still saying Christine. I might be offended because you got my name wrong.
That's good.
Or, I sign up for an event and I tell you some really important thing about why I'm connected to your mission and it doesn't make it to your CRM. I may miss being in a segmentation that I need to be in. If I'm passionate about one particular aspect of your mission, but you don't have that in your CRM, you have no way to know that that's really what you should connect with me on. And that's how you should be connecting and asking along the way. So I think the first step is really, as much as that's a hard conversation sometimes to start unraveling, what are all of your sources of data and how are you getting them all funneled into one place? And what tools and parts of that process are there? I think the other one, and I do think culturally we're better about this,
Mm.
but every phone call, every email, every time you connect with a donor, getting that data into your CRM is really critical over time because it's the history of the connection. We are relational, it is human to human, but at the end of the day, the CRM is what keeps the relationship between the donor and your organization.
That's good.
And that does extend past any one staff member. We hope that's
Yeah.
that's the goal. Like that. So I think really getting started with treating it as a priority, making sure that you're aware of where it's all coming from, that it's all coming into one place, and empowering your team really to see that as an important part of their day, not as a busy work.
No, I love that. And I'm picturing grassroots organizations that maybe don't have a huge team, and they are using a multitude of tools. So they have
Mhm.
a CRM, they have an event platform, like you mentioned, they have MailChimp, like you mentioned. They have a different site to be able to take donations and all of these different things all over the place. But there's no immersion between the tools. Are there any tools out there that you recommend for these organizations, without me being biased, with these organizations
Sure.
utilizing that have the multitude of the things that you need? Like with us on the business side, we love the tool Go High Level. And before we integrated and before we moved a lot of our sites and subscriptions over to Go High Level, I was like, look, I don't want to go to Typeform for forms. And then we go here for webinars. And then we go here for our emails. And then we go here for our landing pages and our websites. Like, I need one platform that could give me everything that we need in
Right.
one login. Are there any tools, especially on the social impact side for nonprofits specifically, or that grassroots organization that you would recommend that is potentially low cost that could be able to give them all of the things that they need?
Yeah. So just a slight disclosure, I do work for a company that sells CRM to nonprofits.
Yeah.
So I do love our tools and I think what we have is a great option. We're probably not the right fit for most grassroots companies. So I do want to kind of say, I'd love to talk to you, love what we do. We're very integration focused. That's a huge part of our mantra is saying you need all your data consolidated so you can do good fundraising. That said, there are other companies out there too. And there are certainly companies that are looking to provide affordable solutions for smaller organizations, especially grassroots, like you're saying. Um, you're always going to have to weigh out which features are best for you. So my hesitancy in saying, oh, everyone should use this tool is really because I'd rather have a conversation with someone and say, what are your priorities?
That's
What
good.
are the aspects of a tool that are the most important for you? What are the things that you can live with? Um, it kind of a overall, because every tool has strengths and weaknesses. Every tool has places where it's stronger. So if email marketing is a huge issue for you, then we should really make sure what tool you land in has good email marketing or a good way to integrate, maybe a Zapier connection, something like that, because we can't compromise on something that is critical for your organization.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a vague answer, but I think it's the right answer for organizations to say it's not just a hammer, it's finding the tool that's really right for the job that you have at hand.
No, I love that answer. I really do. And I recognize, because I've used so many tools in my lifetime and just doing this work, I knew what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I find that organizations make is that they don't maximize the tool that they're even using. They, are on either a super low plan, or they're not utilizing all of the features on that plan. They're not connecting with the customer service to be able to understand how to best utilize this tool. What are some of the things that you're hearing, Christine, in some of those conversations when people are, in fact, trying to prioritize or even understand, like, hey, what are the priorities of the tools that you're using?
You're so right, because when I was working as a database consultant, very often people would come to me and say, well, my tool can't do this or it doesn't do that. And the truth of the matter so often was it did it and they didn't know how, which is one problem. Or it did it, but they had set up their structure in a way that they couldn't use the tool because of the choice that they had made. And so then my job as a consultant became kind of talking them through, either we need to do some training and help you learn how to do this, or we have to talk about changing your structure or changing something with the way you're using the tool, because you've tied your own hands by not setting the system up according to best practices. I think there's a piece in that if you're struggling to get something to work the way you need it to, first start with your software, with whoever owns, like who is an industry expert, whether that's the company, someone else that's a resource, and finding out, is your problem actually one of those two things that I said? Maybe a need for training, maybe a need for revisiting how you're using the tool. If you can eliminate both of those things, sometimes you do need to say, this tool just doesn't
Exactly.
do what we want it to do, or doesn't do what we actually need it to do. And then it might be worth looking at another tool. But I think that really always needs to be kind of the last resort,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're constantly just chasing new tools and you're not getting to a root of, is there a systemic issue? Is there a planning issue? And I think if you've got to resolve those things before a new tool is going to make a difference, because if you have a bad system in place, a new tool won't fix a bad system.
That's good. I think about tools all the time. But I recognize that it's not just about the data, it's about the human beings behind the tools. It's about the personnel. What are things that we can do as leaders or contributors within organizations to not become reliant on the tools, and become the leaders that can be able to amplify these tools as a resource, but not as a replacement to the work?
Ooh, I love that. I think one of the first steps that we need to make in our industry is treating the people who are managing our data as fundraisers,
That's good.
giving them a seat at the table, and helping them to have the view of, what does my work do at the end of the day? But also for everyone else who's maybe a major gift officer or an executive director, to understand what are all of the things that affect what happens for the person in the database. So I think I've seen so often, I've felt like people will say, well, the receptionist has all this extra time when the phone's not ringing, and so we'll have the receptionist just work on the data in the CRM when time allows.
Yeah.
It's a really bad plan for both reasons. One, if you have sensitive data for gift entry and it's on the desk of the person who's at the front door, there's all kinds of security issues. But
Yes.
two, if you're taking a position that really is central to building relationships and making it a secondary add-on when somebody has time. Now, that's not to say receptionists can't be a gifted, valuable data member. It just means I think that there needs to be some priorities around the timing of, maybe you are the receptionist and maybe you are doing data work, but we put some structure around, these 2 hours in the morning are focused entry time and so is doing backup on the phones, or whatever that looks like, but making it a priority role, not an add-on secondary role, so to speak.
No, I love that. And I think that I think about a few organizations that I can't name, that
Of course
it's like this secondary option to manage data. And I've literally been in organizations and even schools and nonprofits where I will come in as a complete stranger initially, and I see people's potential checks or account information, or how much they have given, and first name, last name on the desk. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it's insane. Can you talk to us about the importance of data security and how important that is as
not.
well, just as much as data management and leveraging data as a tool?
Absolutely. I think data security is something that we hear a lot about, especially when there are data breaches, personal information is compromised. I think as a nonprofit, we have legal considerations, of course, but I think really at a heart of it is treating people the way we want to be treated, treating our donors with dignity and respect, and valuing the gift that they've given us, not
That's good.
just the financial gift, but they have trusted us. If I make a transaction, I trust that that organization is going to use that with dignity and respect, and then they're not going to take advantage of that. And like you said, I don't think anyone means anything negative when some of that information is sitting on their desk and they're sidetracked and they're doing 20 other things. I really don't. I don't think that's any ill will towards a donor. But I think what it can communicate is that we're careless
Mm.
or that we're not taking proper precautions with information that is sensitive and should be
Or,
valued and guarded. As much as we want to guard our own credit card, we should guard our donor's credit card.
oh, I love that. As much as we want to guard our own credit card, we should. Oh, that's good. That's good. I love that perspective because I think a lot of times we have to take the same approach in how we would want to guard and secure ourselves. And we have to approach other people as like, hey, this is the card that I'm using. And we have to have that same level of respect and consideration and protection for those individuals as well. You talk a lot about clean data. For someone who's not technical like me, what does that actually mean?
I think clean data is somewhat like saying I have a clean house. If you come to my house, you're going to you will find some dust that I've missed. Or if everyone has been up and awake in my house, there's always dishes because someone is going to eat something. And so I say that more to say I think sometimes we get this idea that clean data means everything is perfect in my database. And every time I pull a report, it's exactly what I want. And there are no duplicate records and no miscodes and nothing like that. Of course, we would all love to say that, and we would love for that to be true. But the reality of a database, just like the reality of I'll just own my house and I won't throw anyone else's housekeeping under the bus. I regularly mop and sweep and dust and wash dishes and put things away, but we live here.
Mm,
And every day somebody leaves something sitting out that didn't get put away quite when I wanted it to, or maybe I didn't put it away quite when it should have been. I'll own it. So I think when we talk about clean data, it's not saying we're looking for perfection, but it is saying that we're looking for a functioning environment that gets us what we need.
that's good. Where do you start, Christine? Like,
You know, yeah, that's a great
where do
question.
you begin with all of this?
Truthfully, for me, I start at the pain point that hurts the most. So
Mm,
if I'm trying to do a mailing letter or a mailing list today to my major donors or my board members, and I pull that list and I see something that's not right, like we have a board member and we've used the wrong title, we fix it. So whatever is going to hurt the most today is
that's
where I
good.
would start, is saying this mailing list needs to go out. Let's fix it. Let's start cleaning that up. As you chip away at those things that hurt the most, then you can kind of keep going. Ideally, I love to see people building out like a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually schedule of here are some things I review and check and keep up with.
That's good.
And that's always my goal if I'm coaching someone and building their strategy. But getting to that point kind of means you have to have the time and you have to be able to kind of sit down, look at your data, identify those pain points, and then start getting strategic. So I know there's a lot in that and there's a lot of time in that, but I think really figuring out what is hurting, and by hurting is really what are you getting, what is a potential problem for you with your donors or with being able to report to your auditors or whatever that looks like. Start there and then kind of build that out over time.
That is such an excellent perspective because I think for me, what I was initially looking for when I asked that question is like, all right, we focus on financials first and then we focus on this and then this. Because for me, I always prioritize the financials because I believe that financials tell a story and then it
Mhm.
allows us to unpack either processes or communication that need to happen with specific donors. But I love how you put it. It's like, what's the most pain? What's bringing the most pain within your organization? Because as you unravel it and unpack it, there's other activities or even processes or data that are going to have to be figured out in that process. How many organizations, just based upon a percentage, have clean data versus other organizations that, whew, they need some work. They need to clean up that house.
Man. Well, that's a really hard question to answer because so much of my career has been working with the organizations that know they have bad data and know they need
Okay.
help. So it's hard to say because I've worked with most of the people I've connected to, that's where they are. I
Yeah,
will say the fact that you know that you need help
that's a good step.
put you ahead of that's the first step,
Yeah.
and that's such a key step. But I know some amazing talented data professionals who are doing the job day in and day out, and they're getting it done. So I know they're out there. I know that there are plenty of people who are making their data work. They're doing the job, they're doing fundraising. They don't need someone to come in and help. So it's hard to say what that percentage is per se.
So,
I think it's good for organizations to kind of take a look at themselves and say, am I getting what I need here?
yeah,
Can we do what we need to do? And if not, let's figure out our steps.
I love that.
Sorry,
I love
not
that.
a good, not a
No,
specific
no,
answer
I
again, but
believe this, and I love how some, even in this industry, everything isn't black and white. I think that social impact plays in the gray. And I think that's amazing. Like how we approach our organizations, it's not this cookie cutter, it works for every organization, just do this, this, this. It's asking, I find that oftentimes the answers that we want or the strategies that we leverage are rooted in asking ourselves better questions that we can reflect on to really unpack and unravel what we're experiencing organizationally. What is one of the myths that you find or that you've heard about nonprofit technology?
I think there's a lot of myth wrapped up around who can use it or
Mm,
who can make the most of it. I started my career a little over 20 years ago. And so I've gotten to kind of see a progression as different
yeah,
generations have been in the office. And I've gone from being the young person who fixed things for other people and to now I'm not quite so young person who I do think I'm still fixing things, but
yeah,
it's a role shift. But I think that we do still see people who get scared of technology and scared of trying to learn it. And so they convince themselves that they can't learn it.
it's good.
And I really do think that the vast majority of people can learn technology and they
Mhm.
at least to a certain degree. I don't think we're all going to have the same level of expertise, but I think that fear keeps a lot of people from actually doing what they are capable of doing and embracing what they can do and really learning to use that technology in a way that would benefit them.
Mm. Christine, you've said a lot of things today that have really made me reflect on the conversations that we're having with nonprofit leaders around the country. And I love this emphasis on data because I think that it's not a conversation that we're having a lot. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about planning. We're talking about how to identify and build our donor database and tell our stories and all of these different things. Why do you think data is never a topic that we highlight? Because it sounds like this is the foundation for the growth of any organization.
Well, I definitely believe it is. I recognize that liking data and get enjoying being in the database isn't something that's for everybody. But I think the piece is that it doesn't seem exciting and it doesn't seem interesting in the same way as
Mm,
maybe talking with a donor or maybe talking about a strategy. But I think the more people dig in and the more they kind of start to understand how much it undergirds the ability to have that strategy, to truly know that donor and to have that picture beyond just what you've had personally encountered with them, but to have
yeah,
that picture of, if you set this all up right, you know what emails they open, you know what links they
right,
click on. So, if you send me an email about cats, I'm going to open it. But if you send me an email about dogs, maybe I'm not.
exactly.
If you're an animal shelter, that's really valuable because you're going to talk to me more about cats. So I think it's really giving people a vision of data is it gives you opportunity to know people and to know things in a way that helps you really do the work of the strategy, like you're talking about, if you take the time to have the infrastructure for that.
That's so good. That's so good. What are one of the I don't know, tools or systems that you think most organizations are underutilizing?
I think it probably depends in some ways on who they are and where they are. One of the things that lately has been really interesting to me, and I mention it with the emails, is so many donor CRMs do offer an email tool, but those email tools often don't have the same level of statistics or the same level of reporting at the end of the day as, say, I not doing it. I don't work for MailChimp. I get no cut for them, but I do keep saying them. But say a MailChimp or a Constant Contact, things like that. I know there's so many others that I'm neglecting to mention.
Yeah.
But seeing those tools and seeing what they give you in terms of open rates, times that people are opening emails, really being able to track what are the actual things people tell you they want to receive instead of just a subscribe, unsubscribe. Maybe you give options within those to say, what are the types of things you like to hear about? I think there's so much in that world that we haven't really scratched the surface on.
That's good.
And then being able to use that to be strategic and cultivate relationships in a different way. I know there are people doing it, but I think largely that's an area that's being missed.
Let me ask you this, Christine, and this is more so for me personally as well. If you were coaching me and I had a question of how often should I be reviewing the data? And then what does that analysis process look like when I see the data? So let's say I look at our email rates or our email marketing, and I'm like, all right, well, 62% of our people are opening up emails at 10 a.m. And then we have people that are looking at the dog emails versus the cat emails. How do I approach it? What am I really looking for? And how do I execute?
There's so many different ways that people go and so many different pieces in that people would test. I think a big chunk of it is going to come back to what kind of organization are you? What relationships are you stewarding? And how does that information, I mean, if you know that I like cats versus dogs, and you are at an animal shelter, that could really be strategic and structural for how you're going to solicit me. But what if you are grassroots organization that's working for social justice on a totally different level? You do not, I doubt you care what my preference is in that area. So I think that's where I say, like, some information is really more useful in one case than another. Knowing what time of day I'm likely to open an email really should help build a strategy around when are you sending those emails, when you're scheduling that. So, I mean, I think it really depends on what piece of information we're looking at and what questions we're looking to answer. And those can vary so much behind all different situations. Are we looking to see when is the most strategic time to send our email? Are we looking to see if people open more with graphics or without graphics or different cases? There's lots of ways to test and there's lots of things to test.
Yeah.
I say that to say, I think organizations can get lost in that and get overwhelmed in that. So I think the important piece is really taking a step back and finding what question is going to help me today to do what I need to do to make my mission more successful. And don't get lost in the weeds of everything that you possibly can do and everything that everyone else is doing, because you just need to run your own race and do what's going to be good for you today.
I love how you mentioned, like, what is the question that I can ask today that advances my mission forward? And I think that we get so caught up in the 6 months to 2 years to 3 years from now, where we don't identify what are the small steps that I can make today that over time compound. And then we look up and now we are really fully immersed ourselves in data, and we're able to have processes and systems and personnel that are really running the ship in the right way. So, there's a nonprofit leader that is listening in. There's somebody in here that is just so intrigued, like I have been in this whole conversation. What would be your advice? What would be your advice for them? They're trying to scale their impact. They're not trying to burn out their team, but they're really trying to use data as a way to grow forward, what would be your advice for them?
I would really truly encourage someone to say, let's start with some small steps that you can take proactively. And by you, I do mean not just that leader, I mean their whole team. So for example, that could mean that the leader starts to make a list of here are the pain points that we see in our database. We don't have a plan yet to fix it. I think we'll get there, but start that. Maybe your first goal is I'm going to start making a list every time we struggle to reconcile with finance, every time the board report just doesn't look right. Just start documenting it, start to kind of identify those kind of pain points and those problems, and then find time, put time on your calendar. I say find time, make time, because I know what it's like when you work at a nonprofit. You have to make the time. Put some time down, say, this is when we're going to start to figure out one at a time, how are we going to fix those pain points? Which one you start with, triage it, figure out what's going to fit. Again, back to that pain point. What is hurting the most? What is causing your team the most time? What is causing the most struggle as you process things? But kind of start just to work through that list and start to figure out how can we begin to address one at a time. What are those things? Because if you look at it as I got to fix everything right now, you don't, it's like eating the elephant. You can't eat the whole thing at once. Nobody can. And there's going to be so many competing priorities that ultimately you might get one or two bites out of this or one or two bites out of that, but you're not going to actually finish anything. So really that's where I think start a list, start strategically chipping away at it in the ways that make sense and build towards getting to the place you want to be. There's always something you can be doing. There's always something you can be fixing. But if you're being strategic along the way, I think you see a lot more progress, honestly, quicker because you're getting it done one by one by one.
Christine, this conversation, it made me so happy to have with you. It really it's exposed how much I want to unpack organizationally. How often are we actually cleaning up the data? How often are we looking at it, and what are we actually doing in regards to analyzing this data, and how can we leverage data to tell a story, so that we could be able to advance our impact within our organization as well? So I thank you so much. Where can people find you, and how can people continue to support the work that you are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best places to find me is absolutely on LinkedIn. I love the conversation and community there. I love getting to participate in these conversations with groups of people, and there's some really great people that I learn from there. So I think that's always a good place to start conversations and join together to all learn together. I also, just as a side point, I do work for Humanitru. We are a supporter. We say we're supporter management more so than donor management because our goal is for you to consolidate all of your data into one place. So whether that's your email marketing, your event registration, if you have memberships, we work to help you get all of that in one place so you have a full picture of your supporters so that you can build those relationships and hopefully see them all become donors over the long haul. So both of those places, but I'd love to hear from you and have that conversation and keep going.
I love this. Thank you so very much, Christine, for your heart, for your wisdom, for sharing and not gatekeeping at all. Love this energy. Love the conversation that we had today. Look, for our listeners, I want you to check out Christine's page. Look up the great platform that she is leading as well, and continue to do this work. Start asking yourself deeper level questions so that we can allow our data to tell a story. For our listeners, one of the questions that we also ask is, what type of culture are you spreading? Remember, the energy you bring is the culture you create. Go make yours worth spreading. I'll talk to you next episode. And thank you for joining us on the Contagious Culture Podcast.